Hi everyone, Ravi this side. Welcome to Engineering Adda. So today we are going to discuss how we can deploy our Spring Boot application on Kubernetes. So first of all, what we'll do, we'll try to create one simple Spring Boot application. We'll create the Docker image of our application and then we'll try to deploy that Docker image to the Kubernetes server. So there is a basic requirement for this video. You need to have installed Minikube and the kubectl on your local machine. So let me try to show you. I already have installed these two. Like these two need to be downloaded on your local machine. Keep it somewhere in your folder, and then the path of this folder should be there in your environment variable so that you can directly access these two .exe files. Okay, so this thing you need to have, and the other uh, requirement is you need to have a Docker desktop on your local system or Docker toolbox. So that you can make your Docker daemon up. So these are the two requirements for this course. So let me go to the slide. So you can see what we'll do. We'll try to create one Spring Boot application. We'll try to Dockerize that our Spring Boot application, and then we'll deploy our Docker image to the Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So let's get started for that. So let me go to the IntelliJ and try to create our Spring Boot application. So you can go to the file, new and project. Let's say I'm going to create a simple Spring Boot application. We are not going to use the database or anything. So in the coming video, I will cover how you can uh, deploy your whole Spring Boot as well as the database on your Kubernetes. But in this video, we'll try to keep it simple. So we'll create one simple Spring Boot application and then we'll try to create one API, let's say get API, and return some string out of that. And then we'll try to create the Docker image of this application and then we'll deploy it. So let's get started for that. So let's say the name of our application is Spring Boot K8s demo, something like that. Okay. And this should be of Maven type. Let me go next. Let me try to include the Spring Web dependency and just create this application. So it will take few seconds to configure the dependencies and all. Once it is resolved, we can uh, create our API and then we need to create our Docker image. So yeah, I think dependencies are resolved. Let me go to the source, main, Java. Okay. Here let me try to create one Git API. Okay. So I'm not going to create the controller explicitly. I'm going to use this main class as a controller class and then create one Git mapping here. Okay. So let's say it is slash hello, something like that. Creating one method called hello world. Okay. And it will simply return the string. Let's say welcome to engineering Adda. Okay. So we are good now. Now let me try to run this application and then hit the endpoint to see if it is working or not. So it will take few seconds to make our application up. Yeah. So our application is up on the port number 8080. Now let me go to the browser and let me try to come here. Let me try to hit the endpoint. Okay. So we are able to see this message which is coming from the Git API. Welcome to engineering Adda. Okay. So we are good now. Now let me try to close this, this, and this. Now let me try to go to the IntelliJ. Let me try to close this one. So our application is up and it is working fine. Now what I will do, I will try to create the Docker image of our application. So for that, I need to create the Docker file. Okay. So just right click on this application, go to the new file and try to remember the name of the Docker file should be capital D, and then after that everything should be small. So it should be like Docker file. And here we need to configure the Docker. So from, if you don't know like how you can create the Docker files, what all this means, there is a whole lot of video on my channel for the Docker. You can go and watch it out. So I'm using the OpenJDK 17. Okay, let me try to remove this OpenJDK 17, and let me try to expose this to 8080. This is the port number on which our application will be up. Okay, now add, let's say I'm adding the jar file to the target location. So target and then the jar file name. So let's say our application name is springboot K8s demo. So I'm going to create the jar file with the same name. So let's say springboot, you can choose any name. Okay, K8s demo, something like that, dot jar. Let me try to copy this. Okay, now we need to make the entry point. Okay, and here we need to provide the Java minus jar and then the jar file. Okay, so the jar file is, let me try to copy this jar file name and come up here. Okay, so we are good now. Why it is giving error? Okay, okay, so the error was coming because of we were having the space here, so you need not to have a space here. So this is the Docker file for our application. So our application is using OpenJDK 17. Okay, and it is exposed to the port number 8080, and this is the location where our jar file will be created, and this is the entry point for our jar file. Okay, so let me try to save this. So we are good now with the creation of the Docker file. Now what we need to do, we need to make our Docker desktop up, or in your case if you are using Docker toolbox, so make your Docker daemon up. So just I'm opening the Docker desktop. Just wait for few seconds, it will take few seconds to make it up. Once it is up, we can configure our Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so if you want to cover me the basic of Kubernetes, what is its architecture, what are the components, then please let me know so that I can cover those things as well. So it is taking few seconds of time to make our Docker desktop up. Just wait for that. Okay, so let me try to minimize this. Now let me try to open a command prompt. Okay, so yeah, so our Docker desktop is up so that we can use the Docker command as well. Okay, so Docker, let me try to run the command Docker images to see what all the images we have locally. So you can see this much images we have locally. Okay, and yeah, we are good. So what I will do, I will try to see how the Minikube is working or not. So let me try to run the command Minikube version. What is the version of Minikube we have? So just wait. Yeah, you can see the version is v1.26.0. Okay, so our Minikube is working fine, but what is the status of the Minikube? Let me try to run this command Minikube status to see if it is working or not. So Minikube is stopped, it is not running as of now. So we need to make our Minikube up. So with the help of Docker, we can use Docker as a platform to make our Minikube cluster up. So for that there is a command called Minikube start. Driver should be Docker. Okay, so let me try to run this command. Minikube start driver equal to Docker and just enter. So it will make our Minikube up. So let me try to come here. You can see this is the Minikube, and this because of we ran this command, this Minikube is up on the Docker. Okay, so we can get one cluster, Kubernetes cluster, where we can perform all those things, like we can deploy our application. Okay, so just wait for a few seconds. Yeah, I think it will take few seconds. If you're doing it for the first time, it will take much of the time, but because I already have the Minikube pod running, container running, so it will won't take much time for me because I'm just restarting it. If you're doing it for the first time, it will take like 2 to 3 minutes to make your or to create the container for the Minikube and make your Minikube up. Okay, so our Minikube is up, I think. So let me try to run the command Minikube status to see what is the status of the Minikube. So you can see the Minikube host kubelet API server is running fine and the kube config is configured. So earlier it was stopped, now it is running. Now we can see that our Minikube is up and it is running fine. But we also need Docker to be used inside the Minikube. So for that we need to run a command, and it is Minikube Docker minus env and just enter. Okay, and then you need to copy this whole command and then just enter it. So now you will be able to use the Docker inside your Minikube. So let me try to run the command Docker images. Okay, so you can see this command is run inside the Minikube, and this many Docker images we have inside the Minikube. Okay, these all are we have inside the Minikube. Okay, you can see this. Earlier when I was running the Docker images command, it was taking up locally and it was showing all the images which I have locally on my Docker. But now when we are running this Docker images, it is taking up the Docker images from the Minikube. Okay, so this is how you can use the Docker inside the Minikube. You need to run this command. Okay, so we are good now. Now what we need to do, we need to create the Docker image of our application inside the Minikube or the Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so let's get it started for that. So let me go to the particular location where our application is. So let me go to the IntelliJ to see where it is created. So you can see the location is YouTube Engineering Adda project March, and then our application is there. So let me try to go there. So let's say CD, it is inside YouTube. And the application name is Springboot K8s demo. Okay, so we are inside it. Now we have the Docker file inside this folder. Let me try to show you that. So let me try to go there. Let me try to come here and inside the project, inside March, Spring Boot, K8s demo. Okay. So you can see our Docker file is here. Okay, so now let me try to build our Docker image. So how we can build our Docker image? So we need to run the command docker build, okay, and -t, and then your image name. So let's say our image name is spring boot K8s demo, okay, and the version of it is, let's say, 1.0, and then root directories. Just enter it, okay. Response from the daemon docker file pass file line number this, and okay. So we are making one mistake. We have not generated our jar file yet. So how we can do that? So let me go to the IntelliJ, and let me try to go to the pom.xml, and here let me try to provide the jar file name. So come here to the docker file and copy this whole thing. Let's say our jar file would be like, you can copy this name, come here to the pom.xml. Inside the build you can provide the final name, and by this name your jar file will be created, spring boot K8s demo. Okay, so now go to the maven and do the maven clean install. Okay, so either you can use this, open this, do maven clean install. Okay, so it will take few seconds to build our application. So once our application will be built, here one target folder will be generated, and inside this you can see your jar file will be generated. Okay, so just wait for that. So once it is generated, you can go there to your command prompt and try creating your docker image after that. Okay, so you can see this is the jar file that we have created. Now come here to the command prompt and rerun this command. So this time it will take few seconds. Okay, the file pass line number this, instructor this, spring boot k8s.jar. Let me try to rerun this and see what is happening. So here you can see we are getting this error. That is why we are not able to generate our docker image. So the error is at the line number 4. Let me go to the IntelliJ, and you can see at line number 4 we have the entry. So I think we are not keeping the space here. That is why it is not picking up. So let me try to make a space here, and then let me try to use this forward slash here as well in the jar. Okay, that is it. So now we need to generate our uh, jar file again. So for that, let me go to the maven, go to this and use the maven clean install. It will take few seconds to generate our jar file. After that, we'll try to create our docker image. Hope this time it works. So yeah, you can see build is success. We have the jar file. Now go to the command prompt. Let me try to run this command. So the command is docker build -t and the docker image name and the version of it and then the root directory. Just enter it, and you can see our docker image is created this time. Okay, now let me try to run the command docker images to see what all the images we have. So you can see this time we have our docker image spring boot K8s demo, and it is created 9 seconds ago. Okay, now what we need to do, we have created our docker image. We need to deploy this docker image to the Kubernetes cluster that is running. Okay, so for that we need to create one Kubernetes deployment object, one Kubernetes service object, and then we can access our application from outside of the world. So for that, let me try to create one Kubernetes deployment object first. So if you don't know what is Kubernetes deployment, service, pod, node, So you can you can Google it out. If you want me to cover those things, then please let me know so that I can cover those things in very much detail so that you can get all the points of the Kubernetes. Okay, so let me try to create the Kubernetes deployment object first. Okay, so just wait for that. So the command for that is kubectl kubectl, you can say, or kubectl, and then you need to create the deployment object. So for that, create deployment, and then name of your deployment object. So let's say I'm going to create the deployment object with the name springboot K8s deployment, something like that. Spring boot K8s deployment. Okay, and then you need to provide the image, Docker image that you have created, its version and port number. Okay, so you can provide it image, yeah, image equal to image name. So you need to copy this, come here, paste it out, and then version of it, which is 1.0, and then you need to provide the port number. So the port number is 8080. So 8080. Okay, just enter it. So you can see we have created our deployment object, which is Spring Boot K8s deployment. So now you can check it out if it is created or not. So you need to run the command kubectl get deployment. Okay, just enter it. You can see you have the kubectl deployment up and running. Earlier I have created this MySQL deployment, so it is also there, but it is not up. So your Spring Boot K8s deployment object that we have created right now, which is 19 seconds ago, it is up and running. Now you can go inside it and check the nodes for it. So for that you can, or you can also describe the Spring Boot K8s deployment as well. So there is a command called kubectl describe your deployment. So you can run it to see what all the description of the deployment is there in your Kubernetes. So let me try to run that as well. Kubectl describe and your deployment name. So just copy this, paste it here, enter. Okay, so it is giving some error. Okay, I'm not running the correct command. It is kubectl describe deployment and then deployment name. Deployment. Okay, so you can see description of your deployment object. So the name of your deployment object is this, namespace default. Go down, you can see the port number, it is 8080, and image is this. Like these are the configuration of your Spring Boot images, Docker images, image name, port number, host, and everything. Here downside you can see we have one available replica, okay, of your deployment object, and it is running. You can see this new replica set and all. So you can go through it and just find out what all these things are. So these are the basic description of your deployment. So you can also see the pod on which your Spring Boot application is up. So for that you need to run the command kubectl get pods, and you can see this is the pod on which your Spring Boot application is up or your deployment object is up. So just copy it, and what you can do, you can just see the logs of your pod. So for that there is a command called kubectl logs, and then you need to provide the pod name. So just enter it. You can see this is the logs of your application. Your application is up on the port number 8080. Okay, now what you need to do, you need to create one service object so that you can access your application from outside of the world. Okay, so let me try to create the service of this deployment. So for that you need to run the command kubectl expose deployment, and then your deployment name, and the type of the service should be node port. Okay, so first of all, let me try to get the deployment object. So for that, we need to run the command kubectl get deployment, and this is the deployment object we have. Now we need to uh, expose our deployment object to the service. Okay, so for that, we need to run the command kubectl expose deployment and the deployment name, and then type of your service. So type, this time we are using node port. Just enter it. You can see your service is created and exposed. Now how you can see the service which you have created? So there is a command called kubectl get service. Okay, so you can see you have one service created with the name springboot K8s deployment, which is the name of your deployment. Okay, so with this name we have one service now. So through this service you can access your application which is running inside one deployment object. Okay, so let me try to get the URL of your service. So there is a command called Minikube service, and then your service name, which is Spring Boot K8s deployment in this case, and then minus minus URL. Just hit enter. It will give you the port number or the URL for your application. So just copy this. Now come here to the browser and then come here and then paste it here, and then you just hit enter. So you can see your application is there. Now let me try to go to the IntelliJ and go to the source main, or let me try to go directly here. So you can hit this endpoint from your the URL that you get from the Kubernetes or Minikube. So the endpoint is hello. Just go to the browser and just paste it here and just enter. You can see you are able to see this log, or you are able to see this string which is coming from the Git API. Okay, so this time you can see our application is not up. Okay, our application is not running. Our application is running inside the Kubernetes cluster, and from there, with the help of this URL, we are able to access our application. So this is how you can deploy your Spring Boot application in the Kubernetes cluster. And this is about the video, guys. If you like the video, please hit the like button and please subscribe the channel for more such content. In the coming videos, I will try to cover how you can deploy your whole Spring Boot CRUD application where you are using the Spring Boot as well as the MySQL database or the PostgreSQL database. So everything I will cover in the coming videos. So please subscribe the channel for more such content. Thanks.